Welcome into this week's episode of Your Drone Questions Answered brought by Drone Launch Academy. I'm your host, Chris Reload. Today's topic is this: drone insurance from an agent's perspective. So to help me tackle this topic, I'm really excited to welcome David Arnold from Bearing Insurance. David, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate you reaching out.
So David, before we get into this, just tell our listeners about your background in general and in insurance, and then also if you have any particular drone tie-in, whether that's recreationally, commercially, or none.
Absolutely. I'll just preface it by saying I wouldn't say I'm the expert on drone insurance. I've got enough experience to be dangerous with some of my commercial clients. But yeah, 24 years in the business. I spent my first 3 with a local farm bureau agency, and then I spent 18 with a small agency in Lexington, North Carolina. The last 5 of those years, they had been bought by an agency out of Jacksonville, North Carolina. So after 18 years of being at Yount Insurance, SIA Group, I don't mind mentioning the name, they were great for me. And I got the opportunity to go to work for USI and spent about 18 months there. And now I'm at Bearing Insurance. I have found my home. I love my team, love the people I work with, all the good things, man. It's been great. If you're not familiar with Bearing Insurance, it's probably because we were formerly known as Bankers Insurance. We have about 18 offices and about 270 employees. So it's been a great fit, great team, and I'm excited to take this to the next level.
That's awesome. So with all that and your insurance background, David, what about your drone experience? Have you flown a drone before? Do you own any drones? Anything along those lines?
So I'll just start with this, and we could just jump right into a little bit of a scary story. My 21-year-old son, when he was a teenager, got interested in drones. He picked up a little drone from the local, Walmart or whatever, probably an $80 drone, got it on sale for maybe $50. And within an hour, it was hung up in a tree, probably 60 foot up in the air. Fortunately, a good buddy of mine is a tree guy, and he came over and he slung a rope up in the tree and shook it down for my son. So that was kind of neat. I start with that because it wasn't long after that he wanted something a lot nicer. We got him a DJI. I don't remember the particular model, but this was in probably 2017, and it was around $600. So it was a nice one. He was 14 at the time, and of course we didn't really know. I mean, he did. I knew he couldn't get his couldn't get his license till he was like 15 or 16, I think it was. But anyways, we had some friends that are realtors and things of that nature, and they were like, "Hey, your son's got that drone. Would you mind going and taking some pictures of this property for us? It's a horse farm up in Brown Summit." We're like, "Sure, that sounds great. That sounds fun." So we get the drone, we do it, get up in the air, and he starts taking pictures and videoing and filming. And I said, "Okay, Ian, let's do one last flyover, and we'll get the pasture, up towards the road, et cetera, et cetera." He flies out over the horse pasture, and all of a sudden I hear, "Ch, ch, ch, ch." And I'm like, "What in the world is that?" And I quickly realized somebody is shooting at his drone. I said, "Ian, you need to bring that thing down now. You're being shot at." And next thing I know, the guy is hopped in his truck from across the street and came over there and approached us and thought we were spying on him. And as you can imagine, he had a little bit of PTSD from a past life. And fortunately, I was able to talk him down. I said, "Look, man, I'll show you the video. There's nothing that we have that's yours." And we were able to get out of that scary situation. You do need to be very careful when flying over or near other people's property. That was definitely eye-opening. And that may have been more than what you wanted to hear or know, but
It's a great story, and I feel like it brings up so many things. I'm glad it all turned out okay. But what if you had shot the drone? What would that mean? And let's maybe ignore the fact that it had been destroyed by someone, I guess, technically committing an illegal act. What if it had just clipped a tree and crashed in the pasture? And we'll start there. As at the time, recreational flyer, how would it work? Could your son have filed a claim if you wanted to against the homeowners policy? And how do hobbyist pilots approach any of this? Are they covered from both a replacement cost if they wanted to and or liability from coverage they already might have? Or how does any of that work for the non-commercial, for the hobbyist pilot?
right. I'll preface it by saying always consult with your personal insurance agent carrier first. But as a general rule, if in that particular instance, granted, his drone was only about $500 or $600. Of course, our deductible is probably 500 or 1,000 at the time, and so it wouldn't have been worth filing. However, I don't think he would have had coverage for that drone, although it was recreational. It would have been, but if they would have found out that, hey, he was being paid $100 to do this or something, So it would have been a little bit of a gray area as to whether or not he was doing it for money or not. As a general rule, hobbyists they need to make sure that there's not an exclusion on their homeowners for aircraft, unmanned aircraft. If you're doing it as a hobbyist, you need to make sure your carrier's aware and that they remove that exclusion so that you mainly pick up the liability side. I think that's more important than the actual item itself, the drone itself. And then, of course, you're going to want to make sure you get that scheduled on your homeowners too, to just to make sure you've got coverage when you take it away from the property and things of that nature. And if you take that same scenario and you say a wind gust and it actually blew your drone into somebody, maybe a playground full of kids, and it cuts or hurts somebody like that. That's the bodily injury, I think, is even more important than the property damage, than the damage on the car. Making sure that exclusion has been removed is crucial.
Got it. But hitting to the commercial side, as a commercial operator, what are the options? Are most folks covering this as part of existing equipment policies? Are they pursuing a standalone policy?
Yeah, most carriers are becoming more and more familiar with this coverage and are removing the exclusion on the general liability side and of course charging for it, right? It's not as prevalent as it once was to have that standalone policy with most business owners. They're able to incorporate that into their existing general liability policy and equipment floater policy. However, if the drone is your business and that's pretty much all you've got is the drone and you're making money with it, then yeah, you probably want a standalone policy for that. But it's better to have everything encompassing where you've got your premises liability, you've got your product liability, and then you've got your drone liability. So rather than having a coverage here and coverage there and coverage elsewhere.
Okay, then can you define then for myself and our listeners to make sure everybody knows what you're referring to when you say those terms?
Yeah. So when a business owner walks onto someone else's property, need to make sure that they've got liability in case let's just hypothetically saying they're running extension cords on a construction site and they've got, sawbuck set up, table saw set up, and all of a sudden the customer comes on the scene and they walk up some stairs that weren't properly marked or something. That's going to be off premises liability. Premises liability would be I go to the contractor's office and it's in the middle of December and we've got snow and ice on the sidewalk and they own the building and they're the tenant and we slip and fall on their premises. That's premises. Then you got offsite. Then you got the product liability. Product liability is building a house and all of a sudden we have a malfunction. Let's just hypothetically say you've got an electrician in there and he's putting nails through the wall and he accidentally runs a nail through an electrical wire and years down the road, there's a claim. The fire, electrical wire shorts out and burns the house down. So that would be product completed, or at the end of the project, you've still got liability on the project that you did. I hope I explained that right.
So to bring it to a drone example then, and
Mhm.
then tie it all back together. So like let's say if I'm a surveying outfit and I've already got other equipment, my total stations, my other gear, my trucks, and so on, I might be able to not necessarily pursue a standalone drone policy. But I think with
Correct.
general liability in the different places, premise, off premise, and so on, could be a factor. And then the product side, I suppose, about utilization, but kind of wrapping all that into both general liability and then the equipment policy. Is that called inland marine? Is that typically the
Hmm.
term?
Yeah.
So
Equipment floater. Yeah.
and so that would cover me because if I'm a business, let's say a surveying office, we already have all this other equipment. But if I was, say, a photographer and maybe I have no premises to speak of because I just go out to the wedding or to the shoot of wherever it may be, that piece I wouldn't have to worry about. But I also don't have any inland marine policy because I don't have any other real equipment that I'm insuring. Maybe a drone specific might make more sense for me. Is that a
That's
fair
right.
illustration?
Absolutely. You got it. Yes, sir.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like liability is pretty cut and dry. But it's a more expensive commercial airframe. It's not my little $500 hobbyist thing from Best Buy. Does it seem to matter as long as the exclusions all I would sort out on the front side? If I have a drone specific policy, if there was a crash, I need a replacement versus if it's a rider or a floater is it all going to work the same to me in the end if I need to file a claim to replace my $30,000 drone, or are there like pitfalls of each of those
Yeah.
approaches?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because on an equipment floater, typically it's actual cash value versus replacement cost. So you do want to make sure if it's newer equipment, newer drones, and you want it replaced in the event of a loss, you need to make sure that they've given you replacement cost versus listed it as actual cash value. If it's actual cash value, you just need to make sure you're adjusting that amount every year to, depreciate the cost of it. So if it's a $5,000 drone when you buy it in year two, it might go down to what, 3,500 or something like that. So you don't want to pay for insurance that you couldn't collect on. It's good that you have an annual review of your equipment in particular to make sure that you're not paying for something that you couldn't collect on.
Yeah.
And that goes for all of your equipment.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I guess the two buckets are liability versus replacement. What's the proper term there? Replacement
Physical
for a
damage.
loss. Physical
Yeah.
damage. Okay.
Yeah. Physical damage, comprehensive damage, basically.
So the question then is there advantages, trade-offs, whatever, to pursuing like just some minimum basis? I guess maybe that's liability only. I don't know. Versus like I'm willing to put out
Yeah.
cash for another $10,000 replacement if I take a lot. Like how would folks navigate that? What are their trade-offs? I'm sure there's a cost factor too for what they're paying for insurance. But yeah, what would you say to that?
You're talking pretty much about liability as opposed to physical damage on the whole, because the whole is the whole, and however much you paid for it is what you're going to insure it for. However, on liability, it's a matter of okay, how much assets are we trying to protect? I always tell people, especially on the personal line side, the homeowner side, there's not a tremendous amount of difference between $300,000 in liability and a million. We're probably talking $10 a year, maybe 20. So go ahead and get the million. You never know what's going to happen. You never, once your kids get to be teenagers, we're liable for anybody that's living in our home and what they do outside of the home. Go ahead and get the million and go ahead and grab that umbrella policy too. The umbrella policy is going to go over and above your existing liability limits. It's going to give you that added layer of protection. An umbrella policy for personal is, probably $200 a year for an extra $1 million worth of coverage. Same thing on the commercial side. It all depends on how much assets you're trying to protect. I would never insure a business for less than $1 million as far as my liability limit. And then again, I always encourage business owners to go ahead and grab that umbrella, have that added layer of protection. So minimum of 2 million is my recommendation on the commercial side. And what you'll find is it's so inexpensive to get that next million, so about $500-600 depending on the risk on the commercial side for an umbrella policy. And that's going to go over and above your auto, your general liability, your workers' comp. It's going to go over all that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. But one of my biggest takeaways from everything that we've talked about is whether hobbyist or maybe even commercial side, double check your exclusions. Don't just assume that either existing homeowners coverage or even an existing equipment policy or existing general liability automatically will cover your drone. And it sounds like, in fact, they automatically exclude aircraft, but include drones. You really need to reverse that, or else you could be sitting in a weird gap.
You got it. And if you're having difficulties connecting with someone at your agency that's going to give you a clear answer, or if it takes you, 3 days to get a response back, I would encourage you just to talk to some other agents about maybe insuring your business or your home. There's lots of other options out there. There are still a lot of agents that give that personal touch, that hand holding, give you the call back, give you their cell phone number to make sure that if and when you need them, you can get in touch with them. Don't be okay with just not getting a call back and just saying, that's just the way it is. That's just the way Johnny is. He'll get back to me eventually. Don't let them take you for granted like that.
Absolutely. David, the last thing to get out of here, how can folks reach out to you or find more information about Variant Insurance if they have more questions about this topic?
Yeah, as I mentioned, Bearing Insurance, you can go to our website, bearinginsurance.com. All of my clients, all of my prospects get my cell phone number on my business card. My phone number is 336-462-4808. Feel free to text that number if you'd like, or you could email me at darnold@bearinginsurance.com. That's bearinginsurance.com, BAARING insurance.com.
Perfect. So, David, again, thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. As always, if you have a question you want us to tackle, please visit YDQA.io or drop me a line at chris@drumlaunchacademy.com. Until next time, have a great week.